Welcome to the Make Australian Football Fun Society. Really, the only question is Paul Izzo the greatest ever goalkeeper? And is Joe Simon's internet working? Joe Simon, you're in Melbourne. Tell us yes to both questions.
We've got a yes and we've got a yes, boys. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Netgear Wi-Fi Extended. If it's good. If not, you didn't hear me say that. And we'll try again next week. But what a game and what a strong connection we have tonight.
Look, the comments are coming in. We appreciate your comments. We love your comments coming in. Joseph Cecconi says, build the man a statue. Teo, we talked last week about Lee Broxham having a statue, and the statue needs to be moved around in different positions to show his incredible utility style play. But let me ask you, Paul, if ever one man deserves a statue based on one game, it was that performance. That was incredible.
It was incredible, and Melbourne Victory now get themselves 2 more games of Popper Ball, and maybe he gets himself just a little bit closer to getting his contract renewed. Who knows? Watch this space. I feel as though we've actually got semi-finals now that are set up for, we have the sort of the dream underdog scenario of a Wellington grand final against the Central Coast Mariners, or maybe Wellington hosting the grand final, or we have just Sydney versus Victory again for the 4th time in a grand final, the 5th time maybe. So I feel as though we're heading, on 2 very divergent paths. I'm not sure which one is MAFFS here. I mean, bigger crowds, more interest around the league is quite fun. But I also think the prospect of Wellington having a grand final at home was quite fun. Now, I'm not so sure. I actually think Wellington might have made a strategic error having the away leg first. It wouldn't shock me if Victory takes a handy lead back to Wellington for the second leg.
Oh, the takes are hot. Daniel says Paul Izzo titanium statue incoming. Ooh. Not just a regular statue, titanium statue. Jacob, best individual performance ever in the league ever. All right, that's 2 uses of the ever. That's how good the Izzo performance was. Look, I am, as listeners of the show will know, I am still obsessed with the Tando Valapi 1 game at Brisbane Roar against Melbourne Victory in about 2008, where he made about 7 saves on debut. It was incredible, and Roar won 1-0 thanks to Dario Vidicic. I still remember that game. It's burned into my memory, and I think I'll never forget this game from Paul Izzo. The fact that not only did he make an incredible amount of saves in normal time to keep Victory in this game, because they were gone for a long part of this game. The fact that he then stepped up in the penalty shootout, made the saves, and then also stepped up and took a penalty. And, Joe, we're talking about this keeper versus keeper. There's nothing better in a penalty shootout. What was your reaction to that moment?
It's the definition of MAFFS, and I think it's the colours coming up against each other as well. When you see the 2 highlighters walking onto the screen, it's amazing. And Izzo, I mean, it was the perfect time for him to take a penalty. He definitely wouldn't, pre-game, he wouldn't have been in line for, the 4th penalty taker, but he was so full of confidence. Like, you had to give it to him. He was just on fire. Best individual performance in that league ever, certainly by a keeper, I think. I can't think of one better.
Ooh, Taylor, does any come to mind? I mean, I've gone...
Yeah, they mentioned it during the shootout, Liam Reddy against Adelaide a few years ago, where I think he saved 4 penalties and also scored one of his own, so...
Yeah, but the other thing as well is that we have to add that to all the crazy stuff that Liam Reddy has done over the years, and it kind of balances out. Look, this podcast is it's not like all those other woke podcasts that are scared to ask the big questions. Blake Hampton, he's asking a big question. Why did Lee Broxham begin his run up from the halfway line? It's a great question. I mean, he's only been on the field for 2 minutes. He came on for, would you say it was the narrative penalty? Was this the penalty that was meant to be the perfect script writer, the Melbourne Victory hero who's been there since day one, the DJ to turn the tables, and maybe he took the run up from the halfway line because he needed to get a bit of acid in his legs, he hadn't been on the field long enough. It's part of his warm-up. What did you think? Did you think that when Lee Broxham missed that the whole thing was going to turn, Joe?
Well, he's been watching too many Ben Brown highlights, Teo, but I thought the run-up was ridiculous. I mean, you're right. Like, maybe it was a case of just coming on the pitch, and that's never a good thing. He hasn't got the miles in the legs, but it seemed like it was his time. Imagine the story. Imagine the headlines. Brock scores the winner. Amazing, but I don't know. He didn't look confident. Sometimes you can tell in a penalty taker's face if they seem confident. Taya, what did you think when he was stepping?
Well, Veliplay physically wouldn't have been able to take a penalty, I think. Or if he had, it would have been like one of those off like a standing start, and he just swings his foot at the ball with no run up. So they had to make a sub. It may as well have been Brox. Look, I actually thought Caputo wasn't going to score the next penalty after that. It's amazing that Victory got themselves into a situation where they had match point on what would have been 3 consecutive penalties. So they had such a safety net that, why wouldn't you send up Broxham for the fairy tale moment?
Look, a lot of good questions are coming in. Shake Your Booty makes the point. Brox is old, like an 80s Volvo. It needs to get up to speed. Yeah, you need a bit of momentum. Maybe that's what it was.
You need to leave the car running for 5 minutes before it takes off.
Yeah, I think that's what the issue. But I mean, it's almost like it would have been the perfect story had Brox scored the penalty. But also, because this is MAFFS and because this is the A-League, it's also the perfect story. They didn't score the penalty. Like, it just makes it so much more funnier. Now, it doesn't have the heartbreak of, say, the Steven Gerrard slip against Chelsea and, the one club legend leaves, on a sour note. It wasn't that because Paul Izzo, the titanium statue. Do we need to come up with a nickname for Paul Izzo? I mean, this is, we talked about the Great Barrier Chief last week. Let us know. Do you have a nickname for Paul Izzo? At the moment, it's going to be the titanium statue. That's what we're going to have to go for now. But
well, I mean, post game they should be playing H to the Izzo, Jay-Z.
100%.
That's clear.
100%.
But I've never really known what that meant. Maybe until now, was it all about Paul Izzo all along?
It was.
Yeah,
look, as we said last week,
I think it would be relief if it was about Paul Izzo, given what's going on in that space at the moment.
Look, let us know who you think's winning the beef, K-Dot or Drake. Let us know if you understand the beef because it's too
different
much
kind of cattle.
Yeah, mate, we're going to talk about cattle. Look, I'm so excited that I've already woken up my girlfriend. She's quite annoyed. It's early morning here in Barcelona. But look, John makes the good point. Melbourne City just didn't have the cattle tonight. And look, so Vidmar needs to get on this early. He needs to start blaming his players, deflecting from his own incompetence. Because if you think about it from Melbourne City's perspective, let's Paul Izzo, we're praising him, but Melbourne City, you've let an absolute miracle slip through your fingers. You were playing against 10 men for nearly 80 minutes or something when you include extra time. You took off, two of your best goal scoring options in Tolga Arslan and Jamie McLaren. And I cannot believe that they let, this game slip through their fingers. The other thing to say as well, they took the penalties first. Usually in the shootout, the team that goes first has the upper hand. And I just couldn't believe it. But Taya, don't you think this is a huge opportunity?
You are overlooking, this team had nothing left to achieve. They already had the 3 biggest wins of the season. Okay, they didn't have the cattle. They didn't have the cattle, and they already had the 3 biggest wins of the season. That's a treble. Melbourne City had a treble by Australian football standards. What was left to achieve? This was just, postseason kickabout. This was all-stars come early. I mean, some people will probably want to be unhappy about playing for an hour against 10 men and losing on penalties and maybe almost losing it within 120 minutes. But ultimately, when they go back and review the season and check all the KPIs, they go, oh, shit, best season in the club's history.
Put the banner up. Put the banner up.
Put the banner up.
Get the parade. Melbourne City tomorrow down Lygon Street is the parade for your massive wins that you had this season. I mean, this is also the frustrating thing. A team that actually, when it turns it on, is so good at attacking, can score so many goals. We've had so many big wins this season. And, for large stretches of this game, just looked like they couldn't create anything. I mean, it reminded me of the famous quote from Patrick Kisnoba when he was coaching City, and he said, unleash hell. Watching that was unleashing hell on some of us. It was brutal, but fair play to Victory. They stayed in the game. It wasn't the prettiest to watch for 80 minutes, but they kept the score at 1-0 and then attacked the last 10. And another Boyce, another, I barely know how to pronounce Geordie Boyce's name, but we have a new Boyce in the arena, another brother. So we talked a little bit about this, the best siblings ever in Australian football history. We've got Aloisi brothers. We've got Vidmar brothers. We've got the Quoll brothers. We've got the Torre brothers, the McGowan brothers. Let us know.
The Griffithses.
And 3. I mean, maybe none of the Griffiths ever went to the same level as, say, John Aloisi. But because there's 3 of them, do you think that adds to the sibling? Do you get extra points is my point.
Triplets.
Yeah. So what do you think? I mean, let us know who is the greatest siblings in Australian football history. But I like the Griffiths for a shout. Look, a lot of nicknames are coming in for Paul Izzo, the Great Wall of China. The boys are back in town. Jacob makes a good point. We're going to talk about the other elimination final soon. I'm surprised MacArthur didn't have the cattle. Yep. Hey, it happens like that. But look, guys, any other final thoughts on this elimination final?
Well,
Victory should still move on from Tony Popovich, even if they win the championship.
Okay. You know what? 700,000 Popper. What are you so angry about?
It's not about the money. It's not about the money. It's about you'll be the defending champions, and at your first home game of the season, there will be no noticeable increase in your crowds because everyone knows what the football's going to be.
I mean, it's a little bit about the money. I mean, 700,000. Why is Popper so angry?
Well, take that 700,000 and just shift it over to Paul Izzo. How about
100%? That's what, man, if I was Paul Izzo, I'd be like, contract renegotiation time. Joe, any final thoughts on this match?
No, just the victory and the manner of which they came back reminded me of the game a couple months ago where it was the Damien De Silva double against Western United.
Yeah, great shout.
Victory, like the manner that they're winning these games. I mean, there's only a couple games left, but they'll just have the belief to do it. I mean, they've come back. That was an incredible victory a couple months ago with the Silva's goals. And Teo.
Can I just say, with the funky rules like having the wins as tiebreakers instead of goal difference this season, an eyewitness at the ground has told me that Salim Khalifi, at the end of 120 minutes, broke off the sideline in celebration and ran onto the pitch, not realizing that it was still level and the game was going to penalties. I wonder, is he actually the only person? Is he the only person that has actually read the rule book? And were Victory supposed to advance as the higher placed team on the ladder? Should that game have even gone to penalties? Is what I'm asking.
Does he know something we don't?
Well, I mean, his transfer from Perth to Victory was so full of technicalities and sort of rigmarole that maybe he actually went and read the rules about, everything, and he's the only one that actually knew what the situation was.
Anyone who has vision of this player forgetting that the scores were tied, despite the massive scoreboards all around the ground, despite the tension in the ground, please, if you have vision of this, if you have evidence of this, please send it to this, because this is one of the... I don't know if you guys ever remember this in the NBA. J.R. Smith, the score was tied between the Lakers between Golden State Warriors and Cleveland. And J.R. Smith, was playing for Cleveland, didn't realize the score was tied and dribbled the ball out thinking he was wasting time because he thought his team was up and he had an amazing opportunity to score. So that is incredible. Maybe he thought that they had won the game because of that time-wasting foul throw that they did when Jamie Young went 30 meters outside his box, kicked the ball out. I cannot believe he did a foul throw there. There was an unbelievable chance. If they'd lost that game, that would have been one of the moments I'd never forget. But go on, Joe.
Can I just say, on that moment where JB Young was sprinting back towards goal, you could see in his face how hard he wanted to get back. But the way he was sprinting and the speed was kind of like, have you guys, when you try to sprint in your dreams and you can't really move, like your feet are attached to the floor, that's what it reminded me of. Like, it was good on him for sprinting back. But I mean, you got to take advantage. That foul throw.
Just as a tangent, it's funny you say that, Joe. I used to have dreams all the time, that where I'm trying to get out of a building and I'm just constantly walking downstairs and escalators and just always trying to walk out of the building and the floors just keep going and going and going and you never actually leave the building. I used to have that dream all the time, and for the first time in about 7 or 8 years, I had one of them this week. I don't know what it means.
What does it mean?
I don't know what it means, but I was in that situation again where I'm just trying to get out of a building and I'm constantly walking down the stairwell and the stairs never end, and I don't understand.
Like Josh Parrish trying to get out of the Tyneat car park.
You know what? If you have seen
Josh Parrish, by the way,
donde está Josh Parrish? If you have seen Josh Parrish, please let us know. Q&A broadcasting legend with Josh Parrish was meant to happen Sidelines. We want to speak to sidelines. We don't know where he is. Start tagging Josh if you can. Just on social media, just say "Donde está Josh? Donde estás? Where are you?" Da, da, da. We want Josh on the show. We don't know what's going on. Speaking of people we want on the show, we want Philip Rollo on the show. He's coming in with a great comment. At least Vidmar can watch the final from the bath now. Fantastic call. We talked last week about coaches in baths, and I feel like Tony Vidmar. Sorry, I was going to say Tony Vidmar. I feel like Tony Popovich could have used one during the kind of more tense moments of that game. Did you see him in the kind of the crouching tiger praying position? I didn't realize he still had that flexibility. It was good to see from a guy in his 50s.
Well, Popper, and it was great to listen to you guys talk about Bath. I mean, you learn a lot on this show, but as a listener last week, I learned a lot about, Stoll, you were saying you took a bath in Copenhagen. I didn't know that before. So you learn a lot about football. You learn a lot about other things. But Popper, he seems like the kind of guy that would be in an ice bath on the side of the pitch with a real grimace on his face. You know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. He'd be into all that. Look, Roller, if you can, we'd like to play a game on this show. It's called What is the Time in New Zealand?
Oh, yes.
Please let us know in the comments, as you are the Wellington expert. And everyone go read Rollo's pieces on the Knicks. One of the best journalists out there from New Zealand. Big friend of the show. Joseph Ciccone says Izzo looked like he had a bath. Most relaxed penalty shootout I've ever seen. Yeah, it was. Man, Izzo, I'm so impressed by the Izzo. This forever, I think, will be defined as the Izzo match. Incredible stuff. But any final thoughts before we move on to the huge segment? What time is it in New Zealand on this match? How do you think the victory will go against Wellington?
I think they will get through because I reckon Wellington. They do drop a stinker every now and then. And even though the second leg is a bit of a safety net, I actually think victory with home ground advantage next week and the hype off the back of this game will get through.
Joe, in a penalty shootout, who would you put your money on? Paul Izzo or Alex Paulson? The statue the stare down between the two movable objects.
I think you have to go with Izzo, don't you? I mean, I think I would still, if I was choosing my team for next week, I prefer Paulson during the game. But I think Izzo's just proved himself as the penalty king. I mean, you can't take that off him at the moment. Who would you prefer?
But man, right now, Izzo. I think Izzo's the greatest goalkeeper I've ever seen. Like, I mean, I do tend to overreact to the moment.
Prisoner of the moment.
John says Popper is huge on yoga. Incorporated it into Glory's training schedules. Yeah, typical rich people. They just get into yoga. They're always down in the. Always just doing my yoga. That sounds very Popperish. Look, should we just quickly mention as well the red card? Well, there's a couple of other things to talk about with this game. So the red card from Zinedine Bachach. Do you guys think it was a red card? For you, it was a fine decision. There was some controversy online. And I know an early red card can ruin the game, but what did you actually think about the decision itself? Teo?
Look, the ref saw it. I mean, if the ref didn't see it, I don't know if VAR necessarily pulls him up for it, but also really hard for it to be overturned. I know Victory fans are filthy about it. It means Bachach is going to be suspended for probably both legs of the semi-final at a minimum. So pretty brutal penalty that he's paid.
Yeah, I agree with Teo. I still can't work out exactly. I mean, it doesn't matter in the long run, but I can't work out where he actually kicked him. If he kicked him, like the footage was so slow and so close, and I still can't really read if he kicked him in the head or the shoulder or the chest.
I think it was a little bit of a shoulder. I think it was just a little bit of a kind of a touch to the shoulder. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say, one of the most unbelievable parts of this match was when we had the live VAR, which I think has been slightly oversold about live. Because I think people thought live that we'd hear the live conversation between the referees, which is never going to happen because you don't want to hear them going, okay, well, go back. What do you mean back? You don't want to hear you don't want to see how the sausage gets made in this case with a VAR decision. But an unbelievable moment when the referee, was it Alex King? I never really know the referee.
It was Alex King. Yeah.
Alex King. So Alex King says to the crowd, and I think maybe we were used to the Women's World Cup where they announced it, where they say, after review, handball or whatever, after review, penalty.
Yep.
Because he said, what did he say before the handball? He said
before the handball.
Before the handball. The crowd hears handball, goes up in absolute rapturous applause, cheering, going crazy. And he goes, before the handball, there was an offside, which does Alex King have a future in kind of like a television studio host? After the
I think he's got a future in prank shows. I think the pranking, Ashton Kutcher, Matt Tilley got a call. He didn't have to word it like that. He really did it on purpose, I reckon. And look, it worked. I fooled me, but the applause.
No. It was amazing, and then the booing, and maybe he just wanted a bit of glory for a second because he knew that he'd get booed. Look, it's interesting that Teo did say that he doesn't think Wellington's going to win because Blake Hampton has pointed out something quite interesting. YouTubers talking down Giancarlo Italiano's team once more. Is Teo going to be pinned up in the Wellington dressing room next week? That's the big question.
Pin D's nuts.
Is Teo's face going to inspire them Wellington to another incredible victory? Look, Philip Roller, he's answering the big questions. He's not like the woke media who's too afraid to answer the big questions.
Got the
like
answers.
What time is it in New Zealand? Paulson also made 3 penalty saves in a shootout against City. Bang, facts. That's all you need to know. Sent at 10:26 p.m. New Zealand time.
Okay.
Shout out. Look, there's so many amazing things happening tonight. Another amazing thing is 20 minutes into the show, guess who has arrived? The sidelines Parish is here.
¿Dónde está Josh Parish?
Josh Parish, ¿dónde está? Josh, what happened, mate?
Look, Stoll, I had to take some time to pick my jaw up off the floor after what I just saw. Incredible. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. Preston Lions women 8, Calder United 0. Unbelievable scenes.
Traditional rivals.
So because of such a big win, does that mean that they are automatically champions now? I'm assuming that's the biggest win of the season.
Yeah, they'll be getting a certified letter in the post from FFA, like when the Queen knows that someone has turned 100, they send them a letter and they say congratulations.
Dear. Well, they are actually top of the table with that win, so it could be a twofer.
All right, excellent. You know what, guys? Last week, I feel like Josh's mic this week is absolutely perfect. Perfect pitch, perfect tone. Last week, there was a lot of comments about not being able to hear him. Let us know. Look, this show is pretty interesting. What time is it in New Zealand? We're answering that. Can you hear Josh? Let's get the answers on that. Do we have nicknames for Paul Izzo? Let us know that one. We are going to get on to the other thing. Josh, do you catch any of this epic elimination final Melbourne Derby?
I did catch a good part of the end of the 90s, some extra time, and definitely the spot kicks. Paul Izzo, I loved how nonplussed he looked about the whole thing. Just from the Ernie Merrick school of facial reactions.
Wait, you know what it's like working Sundays, you know?
I know. He's like, I don't even get time and a half for this. Unbelievable. Yeah, exactly. He's like, what's everyone so worked up about? But I did want to say, in that game I just called the MPLW game, I saw something that I've never seen before. And this is a player getting their own assist.
Oh, okay.
So there's an in-swinging corner to the near post, a header straight up in the air, and then the same player runs onto their own header to head it into the back of the net. Absolutely remarkable. I'll clip up the video for you.
Oh, guys, go to Josh Parish's Twitter account this week. We'll share it as well. But I mean, geez, that's incredible. I mean, he doesn't get much more mathsy than that. I mean, who needs teammates in that thing? Look, more comments coming in. Hirado says, for once, I'm late instead. I mean, don't worry. The fact that you've turned up at all is still a pleasure. Sometimes we're late. Josh turns up 20 minutes into a show. It doesn't matter. Jacob really enjoyed that VAR explanation from Alex King. There are so many levels to the live VAR explanation from him. The equivalent to when a story is about to end, then says, or so he thought. Yeah, is it the call an ambulance, but not for me? Is that what Alex King was doing? It's a penalty against victory. Look, incredible times. But look, should we move on to the other elimination final? Sydney FC 4, MacArthur 0. Look, a little bit ruined by the kind of first half red card. But what I want to know from you guys is, does this mean that Courtney Perkins is the greatest player ever? Because if that was a direct, obvious goal-scoring opportunity as he chested the ball on the edge of the box, you know, is he Zlatan Ibrahimovic that we've always been looking for? What do you say, Teo?
I'm going to put about as much effort into analysing this game as MacArthur did into keeping it close. I mean, what a disaster. I honestly think MacArthur was the only team left in the top 6 capable of beating Sydney FC this season. So Sydney, congratulations on winning the championship. And I'm calling it now. They'll beat Victory in the grand final. And look, yes,
what makes you say that? Why are you so confident in Sydney FC? I mean,
because they've got the Mariners number. They've got them head to head, and Victory aren't a very good team. And Wellington on an off day are sitting ducks, quite frankly. Pin that. So I think that Sydney's got the form, and I also think that, you know, if your opponents are getting sent off for that, it's kind of your season, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, it's a good point. Joseph Ciccone says there is a stigma against MacArthur Football Club. The stigma is I often forget that they exist. But, well done to them on another season. Joe, how did you see this game?
Look, there are a number of different moments that kind of caught my eye. Firstly, the Robbie Mack goal. Great attacking play. He had Tommy Smith on toast. You know when Virgil van Dijk, and usually does it really well, he does that kind of trot back, jockey you to a side defending.
Yeah.
I just feel like Tommy Smith was not. He was just going back as far as possible. He was getting out of there as quick as he could.
Well, the worst sign, Joe, is that all the Wellington fans were tweeting at Auckland saying, "Announce Tommy Smith." So the rivalry between those two clubs is alive and well.
You know what? It was funny actually when I saw that guy. I just was like, I wanted to see for MacArthur who's on and off contract. Off contract, Tommy Smith. So I don't think that's getting renewed anytime soon. That was a rough little moment. But hey, good result for Sydney FC. Anything else you noticed, Josh? Joe, sorry.
Okay.
Josh, you go first.
Fair enough. Tommy Smith, I think he still had a good night because he's a product of the Ipswich Town Academy. So, 250 odd appearances for them over the years. So he wouldn't have cared one way or the other how that game went.
Yeah. So it's a good shout. I'm going to talk about Luongo in a second. Joe?
Oh, yes. So another thing that caught my eye in this game, the Candyman, Lolly, what a goal that was. Now, three things about the goal. A superb finish. Off the post, so we got the noise. We got the ball against post noise, but also another layer, the little drizzle, the droplets off the net in the slow-mo replay behind the camera. Now we've got everything sorted there. The talent, we've got the audio, and we've got the visuals. What more can you? That's cinematic.
That's a TV producer right there.
Yeah,
and the funny thing is, if people don't know, Joe Simon works in TV. He used to work on Deadliest Catch. where how water dripped off a net used to be one of the biggest things that they would focus on in their production.
I've got an eye for these things.
But, I agree. So, you talked last week or a few weeks ago about getting the chain nets on the goals. Yep. And I think chain nets are a great idea, right? I mean, apart from player safety, that's the only real issue. And also it'd be heavy as to put up and, but look, I think they're going to stay a lot more stable than, say the other nets, Costa Barbarouses knows all about that. But you're right. We need to give the nets a good hose. And I don't know what the water restrictions are like in Australia at the moment. Given every ALA game seems to be pissing down rain, I assume we've got plenty of water in the dam. But just a little bit of a hose onto the net so we get that effect. I totally agree with you. And can I also say, Joe Lolly, the Candyman, injured in his celebration, it seemed. Now, I'm still hoping that Sydney FC are going to announce that we talked about it previously. How long can you commit to the fake celebration where you kind of pretend to pull your hamstring but you're actually celebrating the goal? Joe Lolly seems like he's gone a few days into this commitment. Josh, do you think there's any chance that we see on Monday a backflip?
A literal backflip?
Maybe.
Like a Nestor Irankunda style backflip or a metaphorical one?
Both.
Joe Lolly, just pack him full of painkillers and send him out there. Who cares? Yeah. He's too good to miss out on a game this big. He's unreal. And I do think that there's some of the players warming the bench at Sydney last night were probably stronger performers than some of the starters, but Joe Lolly not amongst those. So I think they're going to patch him up any which way they can.
Yes. Obviously people are getting onto the fact that I maybe have dismissed MacArthur a little bit too much. Daniel says Nick Stoll on MacArthur's barn door for next season. There's a good chance. Aaron says, could you say the cattle was being sent back to the barn? I don't know how farms work. To be honest, neither do I. I don't know if the horse has bolted. Is that one of the things that has happened?
That's not bad.
I can't believe Stoll that MacArthur, you forget they exist. They just don't ring a bell for you when they've been trying to create a Pavlovian association for their entire existence. It's just not working.
I don't know. Have the chickens come home to roost? Do you not count your eggs before they hatch? I can't remember. It's really good points from everyone around. Jacob, Lolly wanted to one up Pena and injure himself scoring the goal. Yeah, it's a good thing. Blake Hampton says Jordan Courtney Perkins from centre back to left back to marauding attacking midfielder. Where will this evolution end? I mean, probably he's been inspired by Paul Izzo and wants to go in goals and have an incredible game. Shake your booty. The Courtney Perking two dad zone doesn't have the same ring as the ready zone. That's a good point. John asks, should they water the nets at halftime the same as they do for the pitch? Joe, you're kind of the expert in the visuals net.
Yeah, I think
world.
so. I think they need a bit of a polish on the posts, a bit of a water, halftime oranges. Get them ready.
No,
I mean, I was impressed by
Philip Curto was knocked out, mate. No more polish on the posts.
That's a good point.
You know what? Can I say as well? Look, whenever we come up with an idea, what you need to do in the modern day kind of capitalistic world is come up with a sponsor to activate these ideas. So, for example, there's a lot of cattle talk on this show. Can we get a beef sponsor in? Can we be sponsored by kind of a local butchery or something? That's important. These nets, yeah, go on.
Josh, is Victory, are they still sponsored by, is it Lionica?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, get the butchers involved. Come on, get the cattle on the pitch.
They're more chickens, aren't they?
Yeah, they're
chickens.
All right. You think chickens when you think...
Okay. Well, we should talk about Victory sponsors. I mean, what a week. What a week for AIA Insurance. I mean, one game, one incredible win. What do you think of the new kit, by the way? No collar. Was that a kind of, we're no longer formal. This is party time. Now we're in finals.
Yeah, maybe, let loose a little bit. Also, the AIA is a little bit lower on the belly, the belly button height, but I didn't mind it. I thought it looked quite clean. What did you think?
I'm just glad an insurance company is getting involved in an A-League team, because I think we need quite a lot of insurance to get us through these next few months. But look, guys, any final thoughts, Josh, on Sydney FC MacArthur?
Not so much. On the Victory Special Edition kits, it was very funny that Ultra Football announced a restock of their special pink away tops. And then Victory posted about it and just carefully framed out the sponsor logo on those tops. So good fun.
I love an old sponsor top. I love a shirt that immediately becomes, redundant.
Well, it's vintage now.
Yeah, it goes up in value. The thing, I think,
also like an old airline stole. I know someone who's trying to sell a few.
The thing I think that is incredible about it is, those shirts that they make for championship teams, like MacArthur A-League Premiers 2024.
Well, I can tell you now, there's a box of about 50 of them somewhere at Amy Park for Melbourne City after the weekend.
It just says highest score of the season.
Teo, I don't envy the Bonza administrators, because if the A-League has taught us one thing, it's impossible to sell the Jets.
He turns up late, but he stays sharp.
This is what he does. This is what sidelines
Here it is.
Look, we should talk about Sydney FC, another great triumph for the club, winning the A-League Women's. Teo, you were on the call. Also joining us for this chat is friend of the show, Taryn Hedo. Taryn, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well. Just got back from the big game today. Brunswick Zebras State 1 Reserves 8, Craig Euburn City 0.
Another 8-0. What's going on in Victoria? What's happening with these 8-0s?
Well, we had they had an early red card, and unlike Melbourne City, we didn't bottle it. So that's what happened there.
Are you in line to replace Vidmar at City now? You've shown them the way to capitalize on the extra player advantage.
Well, I think after my coaching days are done, after I got sacked from state leagues, I'm not sure I'm quite up there yet. But maybe a triumphant return in goals, like clean sheet. What can I say?
I think so. Look, let's talk about the other, game. It wasn't as big as obviously your 8-0 victory, but Sydney FC winning their 5th ever A-League Women's Championship in Melbourne against Melbourne City. Teo, you said they were top of the mountain. Just give us your overall takeaway from that game.
The only way this game will live in anyone's memory is if Sydney now goes on a long stretch without winning a title, and everyone has to go back to this grand final to remember. No, I'm being serious. Everyone has to go back to this grand final to remember last time they won one. Taryn, there were 2 chances to score in the first 4 minutes of the game and 2 really good saves. Do you think, and this is, we could have had a much funner grand final if it was a shootout. The dogs are barking, but do you think if one of those 2 goals had gone in, it would have exploded, or we would have just had a team defending their lead for 88 minutes to win the championship. Because very quickly, this started to feel like one goal wins it. And I actually went into the game hoping that we would get something more like a shootout and a goal fest between the two teams.
Yeah, I was so optimistic in that first half. It looked like it was going to be a fun game. And then we proceeded to see 60 minutes of Melbourne City passing it around in a triangle, which was quite disappointing until Sydney FC got the breakthrough, of course. So, yeah, it was, I don't know. It could have been, it could have been that shootout had one of those 2 goals gone in. I also thought it was maybe a game that could have been defined by the goalkeepers, but in the end, there wasn't really even the opportunities for us to say, oh, it was fantastic goalkeeping or anything like that. Yeah, I agree with you in terms of spectacles. And I had a lot of people go to the game who I play with and who don't usually watch the A-League Women's, and it's not necessarily the kind of game that you would use to try to convince them to become fans of the league. But,
God, don't you hate
have a
that?
good time. So
Don't you hate that when you're like, yeah, go check it out? No, it'd be amazing. It's a final. It'll be incredible. And then they're like, yeah, but nothing really happened. I mean, in my game, I win 8-0 every week. Where was that? And you're like, yeah, sorry.
Exactly.
But
it's not as fun.
Well, so I upset a few people I know because I described it as 2 teams who are already powerhouses. Their positions at the top of the hierarchy are secure due to how they run their clubs and, financial backing and so forth. They're always going to be good teams, big teams, and even if they're down, they won't be down for long. The only way they could make this game historically memorable is to give us an actual great game out on the grass. And I compared it to the 2018 AFL Grand Final between Collingwood and West Coast, where there was no underdog, there was no sort of heartwarming story, there was no premiership drought of 20, 30, 40 years that needed to be broken. It was literally just 2 of the wealthiest, best supported teams ready to go at it and give us a great game. And they gave us a great game. And clearly, City and Sydney didn't get the memo. They both had to be told, you owe it to the competition not to pass yourselves to death and actually give us something. But what I wanted to ask about, Dario Vidosic after the game, this kind of, I'm really struggling to work out whether this is cope or whether he has a point. He said that I highly doubt one of our players would go to another A-League club unless she wants to sit in a block and run in transition, then maybe. Ooh. He also said his team was the only team that, quote, played football, which is an interesting perspective. And Josh and Taryn, you were both in that press conference. So did Dario Vidosic put in his audition to be the Western Sydney Wanderers' next men's coach? Or what are we doing here?
Dario Vidosic came in very sure of himself, I felt. He was not... It basically said, nah, we dominated the game. Sometimes you don't score. That was the attitude he had throughout the whole press conference. He wasn't willing to cede any kind of responsibility. There was no reflection. It was just... Sometimes we don't score, but we were a better team.
They dominated possession, but it wasn't like they created a billion chances and, Jada Wyman had a Paul Izzo-like game or something. Like, it was a lot of kind of dead possession, I mean, I don't know. I just think this whole idea of we had more possession. We dominated the game. So, therefore we get the moral victory. They got to do something with the ball as well as like having it. I don't know. Taryn, your thoughts?
Yeah, they do have to do something with the ball. I mean, Sydney just sat in it was a 4-1-4-1. So before Shay Connors came on, Princess Abini was sitting up the top, and then there was a block of 4 in midfield, and then either Shay Holman or Margot Chevet would sit just in behind, and they just stood there. And they said, City, pass through us. And inevitably, City could not pass through them, and then they would lose the ball, and then Sydney would try and go on a counter-attack, and then Rebecca Stott would be there and win the ball again, and then the whole cycle would repeat. And this was 60 minutes of the game. This was a full third of the contest was just that over and over and over and over again. And it's one thing to say and I generally would say, yes, it is better for a team to have the ball. Yes, it is better to try and play with the ball as opposed to trying to counter and things like that. But at the same time, you have to do something with the ball. It was endless, pointless possession. It was really the last 20 minutes when anything kind of happened.
You know what? Vidosic ball. We saw it with Rado's teams. It's good to see Dario's continued on the tradition. Shaky Booty says, it wasn't a fun game, but Indy Dos Santos' pass to Connors for the goal was heaps fun. That was an amazing pass. And for a 16-year-old, Teo, like you say, people aren't going to remember this game. Are people going to remember this game for the time that Dos Santos kind of put herself on the stage, and this is the first time that really got the kind of national attention? And is she going to be a future Matilda with a great career? You know, I know you're not a clairvoyant, and we've got to call the hotline. But
call the hotline, yes.
Yeah, but do you see a path for her kind of like that?
Well, it's funny like that because you never know which players played in this game that might explode as late developers, or in the case of the young teenagers, go on to great careers. And we perhaps might rewrite or retrofit a game like yesterday to say, oh my God, Tori Chumeth is the next Claire Hunt. Here's a highlight reel of her amazing defending in the game once she becomes like a permanent Matilda. It seems as though maybe there's a few sleeper agents, but Dos Santos, all you need to do is listen to her post-game interview that she did on 10. Just the pitch of her voice is wild. You are a little kid. You are a little kid. There are 16-year-olds, you know, especially in the men's game or the boys' game, who have the cocksure ethnic confidence, and they're totally ready to go and play senior men's football, and you know they're already you know, maybe senior NPL players or ready for senior A League on a regular basis. No, this is like, you know, cotton wool for at least 2 more years in the A League. Don't start arranging your transfer to one of the biggest clubs in the world just yet, but the potential's there. All you can say is the potential is there. It's a good showcase for the league. I mean, yesterday smashed the crowd record for a grand final in Melbourne, and 7,000. A lot of people were like, oh, what about the effect of the Women's World Cup? Blah, 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 blah. But it's still the second best grand final crowd that's ever happened. And I do feel as though if you take the time to actually just enjoy the league rather than endlessly complain about it, you might actually have a bit of a healthier perspective, rather than, you know, ticking off your checklist of things to nitpick. So 7,000 for a Melbourne City standalone women's home game is an exceptional result, given that when this team had the proxy Matildas, they were barely pulling 400.
Yeah, it's a good point. Taryn, Sydney FC's legacy, the legacy of Ante Juric, you know, the 5th champion, 5-time champions, Ante Juric once again winning a title. How do you think kind of he sits in Australian women's football?
Yeah, he's got to be pretty high, right? It's a constant refrain of Sydney FC fans that, he doesn't get the recognition he deserves, and no one's talking about Ante Juric. Lots of people are talking about Ante Juric. Like, we know he's a good coach. It's okay. You know, it's invariably we expect Sydney FC to be good, and that's why he's not getting these awards and whatever. We know he's a good coach. We know he's done well at Sydney FC, and we know that they're a fantastic team. And last 7 finals, 3 of those now they've won, 5 in total, the first team to do so. Like, yeah, we know they're good. They're going to keep being good. They're going to keep churning out the young talent. Good for them. Good for him.
But I think it's worth remembering that Sydney FC is captain pick first in the playground. This league is full of teams. This league is full of teams that aren't trying to actually challenge them. They're just not. Sydney FC had players who were smiling with their premiership medal or their championship medallions yesterday that didn't even play 90 total minutes for the season and would have played almost all 22 games at other teams, because they would rather not make the bench at Sydney than go and play for Canberra or Newcastle or Western Sydney Wanderers or move interstate. To me, that is the onus on the other clubs. Your sales pitch isn't good enough. You actually need to offer up, you know, some game time and say, don't let Sydney FC build a first place team and a 4th place team so that when everyone gets injured, the ship of Theseus just keeps replacing the planks.
It's funny you say that, Teo, because something that Ante Juric said in the presser was like, the player market's changed a bit. Like, it's not as simple anymore as just call up a player. Do you want to play for Sydney? Yes. Which is what basically what Sydney used to be. It was like, it used to be so much easier.
He said the quiet part out loud on what their history in this league has been.
But maybe, like he said, it's no longer the case. Obviously,
because now he has to say, do you want to sit on the bench for Sydney FC? Yes. Do you want to not even sit on the bench, but just train and maybe be a reserve? Yeah, fine, no problem. Maybe that's how it's changed.
Fun.
And yes, they are the haves in this league, but you know, I do think they had to do it tough. You know, as far as Sydney go, which is not that far, but they had to do it tough in this game. And as he said, you know, they won ugly, and it was grit and determination and defensive effort and all those sorts of things. So he's clearly a coach that can get the best out of a group mentally. I think there's some sort of connection that he seems to have that seems to work. And you can see he was quite emotional in the press conference. Like he was sort of like semi on the verge of tears for the entire thing, even when he was laughing and telling jokes. And you could just sort of sense the strong bond that he and Mackenzie Hawkesby have when they were sitting next to each other. And she was saying, you know, like coming back, like until I left, I didn't really realize how much I just loved playing for Sydney FC. Like this gives me so much joy. And obviously it didn't work out for her in the WSL. And that's why she's come back midway through the season and helped them win another championship. But clearly there is something to his management style, which while doesn't have the kind of overarching philosophy, he's not Pep Guardiola, he's not wedded to his principles, but he knows how to win games, and he'd rather win ugly than lose pretty. And it seemed to me that the overall impression I got of that game was that Dario Vidosic came out to win on his terms and his terms only, and Ante Juric came out to beat Melbourne City. And that's what happened.
Yeah. Darren?
Well, what I will say on the Sydney FC recruitment is maybe players will be motivated to go to their cross-city rivals, the Wanderers, considering they now have a Dolan medalist in their team. So maybe players will look at that and go, well, maybe I could join the Wanderers and win a Dolan medal.
Yeah,
my favorite line from Sophie Harding when she came up to the press box just after this little press finish, someone said, "Oh, who do you think's going to win?" And she's like, "Oh, I hope they both lose." It's like crossing rivals.
That comes back to my point about how this grand final, the only way it was going to resonate was if the two teams actually played a memorable game in isolation on the field. No one went into this game with a barracking interest other than the fans of the two teams.
Hirado says it was disappointing we didn't all get the grand final that went along with how the dub has improved with an expanded regular season, but at least we had that goal. Yeah, it was a great goal. 6 of the first A-League women's grand finals up to 2016 had both teams scoring, but only 2 of the 8 since then. Third 1-0 grand final in the last 5. Yeah, so I don't know, maybe we are due an incredible grand final next season. We'll have to wait and see. Look, 47 minutes into the show, this might be a record, but we've got the full squad here. Taryn, I'll start with you. What made Australian football fun for you this week? And if we've already talked about it, that's fine. We can just move on. Please.
I mean, has anyone mentioned the mini ute yet? Because I know that's an obvious answer, but the mini ute never, ever, ever gets old. And Teo, just the commentary. Don't stall. Best. The mini ute is always very, very fun.
You know what? I think it's one of the great bits of promotion that, you're right, it never breaks down. It's always reliable. I mean, Isuzu should be all over that. That should be the actual ad that you see in between the matches during advertising. Teo, what made Australian football fun for you this week?
What you didn't see is that was the hire car I also had to drive back to the airport earlier this morning. What made Australian football fun? I don't know. I mean, I got to see a lot of the MAFFS Melbourne crew heading down to Victoria. Amy Park is weird since the renovation out the back. Not the Amy Park I recognise. All those changes during the Women's World Cup. What made Australian football fun? I think we've already talked about it. The victory penalty shootout. Mm-hmm. Like we were in the chat ready to go. 7:10. Yep, full time. We were probably going to spend the entire game talking about Zinedine Mashash's red card, and in the context of the Courtney Perkins red card or the Keely Adamson red card, we would have been speaking about refereeing for a lot more of this podcast. So thank you, Melbourne Victory, for kind of changing the point of the discussion. That's what I found fun this week. Extra time and penalties in that men's elimination final.
Speaking of mini utes, Bohemians FC in Dublin have a mini Dublin bus bring out the match ball. Dublin buses are a sponsor, and they have a bus seat pattern third kit 2 seasons back. Give it a look. Mate, I love it. See, just always thinking of sponsors. Maybe we need to have more. Maybe NPL needs to start getting some car sponsors bringing out the balls. Josh Parrish, what made Australian football fun for you this week?
I was going to say, speaking of public transport upholstery, which I never thought would be a segue, the train seats in Melbourne, which have still have, if you look closely, they've still got the letters Connex sublimated into the pattern. And it's funny because Connex haven't run the trains in Melbourne for about 15 years now. So they've actually redone all the seats in the same pattern. And I don't know if the current private provider of Melbourne Australians has actually realised that yet, which is very funny.
Wow.
But what made Australian football fun for me this week? Well, I've mentioned it already, top of this show, or top of when I came on. Hayley Johnson heading the ball to herself, and I've got the video now for you.
Oh, please share.
Trust Nishimura's delivery, which is in at the front post. Johnson heads skywards. Hayley Johnson! And that is goal.
Bravo.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
Double fantasy points, assist, goals. That's incredible. Joe,
Josh, it's funny because I quarter trained briefly on the weekend down in Melbourne, and the upholstery. Couldn't believe it. The upholstery said AIA. They must have replaced one of the old Codex cushions with AIA as the sponsor.
Turn that around quickly.
They've turned it around very quickly.
Taryn, did you want to say something about the assist goal?
Very, very quickly on the Preston Calder game. I saw I was just scrolling through my feed and I saw the 8th goal and I was like, excuse me, like Preston 8, Calder 0. Like, what is going on? So, quick little quote tweet. Oh, what's going on with Calder? Mark Torcazo, big shout out to former Western United, Calder United coach Mark Torcazo. Quote tweets my what is going on with Calder just with a sad face, with a single tear. So that's what Preston have done this weekend in Australian football.
Are you unironically saying Preston's fault?
Preston's fault completely. There's it's just being a bully, at that point. Only some teams can win 8-0. Other teams, it's just a bit much.
Yeah. Joe, what made Australian football fun for you this week?
Look, this feels like so long ago. I know I wasn't on the show last week, but it feels like so long ago that it's happened. But Central Coast actually lifted the Premier's plate for the first time in 12 years. Now, this was excellent for me. I mean, it was great to see them. It's a moment that they'll never forget. And in a moment like that, you don't want anything to go wrong. I'm going to play a little clip before we describe what's happening.
2024 Premiers, the Central Coast Mariners!
Now, at the end there, the barricade falls over just as Vukovic is lifting up the title. Is it the TPG logo that I could see underneath? Teo, surely you know what that is. What is the could have been AIA. But it made me think, is there, and people pay a lot of money for advertising, is there a market in the A-League for billboards underneath other billboards in case this happens again?
A reveal,
a
second
reveal. That's right, yeah. Maybe you get a discount price. Maybe Lyonica can get back in.
Because it did feel like the billboard as the champions lifted the Premier's plate. I mean, it felt like a Simpsons joke, like just a visual that they do at the end of the season. Like, it was so perfectly timed. A lot of people want this big glitzy trophy presentation. No, I think this is a far better solution. But I love your idea, a kind of backup sponsor. Are you
just on that presentation though? Pete Pryor, who is the Mariners ground announcer, was commandeered to do it rather than pay Adam Peacock or fly Michael Zapponi to Gosford. They just went with the guy that does it every game, which makes me really want MacArthur to win a Premier's plate because their ground announcer Nicholas Kudniak, they can unleash him. And if you think Pete Pryor was a homer and had a lot of fun with the names, I want Kudniak. So MacArthur, there's your incentive to try and finish top of the ladder next season.
Yeah, pin it up. Look, we should talk about that. The Mariners, they play tonight in the AFC Cup. They are the champions. Kind of an incredible turnaround of the season. There was a nice article in the Sydney Morning Herald from Vince Rigari about all the 100,000 kilometers that they've traveled this season, and they did like a kind of amazing video to go with it. But I think a really cool way that they've turned around the team. And Teo, you were calling the game, and I like to think, if we think of Les Murray as the voice of Australian football, fine, Les is always going to have that title. What I want to give you is the voice of fun football, Australian fun football, because you brought it up the other week. You were commentating when Perth was having all the fun games, right? All the incredible games.
Winless in nine since I stopped commentating.
Yep. So you stopped commentating; they stopped being fun, right? Did you do any MacArthur Mondays? Remember early in the season there was
MacArthur Mondays. Haven't done it. I've done a few MacArthur home games, but not a MacArthur Monday.
Okay, well, that's next season's goal. But then there you were, the pouring rain. The Mariners are one of the most triumphant moments in the side's history. And there you were commentating. How did you see the game, and how did you see this kind of Mariners side? And do you feel that they'll build on this positive momentum and win tonight in the AFC Cup?
I think they kind of need to win tonight because their bogey team, Sydney FC, has had them worked out this A-League season, and now the deck is stacked a little bit more against them, having to play that first leg on a slightly shorter turnaround. Hopefully, they can actually fly direct back. I assume they'll go Oman, Qatar, maybe direct to Australia, or maybe Singapore, Australia, after what they had to do after the away leg in Kyrgyzstan due to the flooding in Doha. But look, they have been a cut above every team they've played in this competition. Yes, it's nice for the Mariners to win and the prize money and the prestige of winning this trophy, but it's also an indicator that you can still be a good A-League team and have a good run in Asia. And I just feel as though the Champions League has been such a tough nut to crack. I don't want Australian teams winning the AFC Cup every year. I want them competing in the Champions League and being better in that competition every year. So I think the Mariners will win 1 or 2-0, take your pick. But hopefully it's the one and only time an Australian team actually wins this competition.
Yeah, and it was interesting in Vince's article. It talks about how they don't pay huge salaries to players and the player turnover that they've had, and all that kind of stuff, and the fact that they fly economy.
Yeah, they don't fly business class, Stoll. So John Terry not going to be joining the backroom team of the Central Coast Mariners anytime soon.
Yeah, it's a great point. But this team, I think we've got to call them the Mythbusters, because there's so many myths in Australian football about you can't compete in Asia, you can't deal with player turnover. When you lose your coach, there's no way that you can go back to back. The Mariners are just busting myths every time, and it's great that it's the Mariners, one of the the, for a lack of a better word, the poorer teams in the league. But all those sauce bottles obviously inspires them. Anyone got anything else on the Mariners, Josh?
Well, I just wanted to read one ridiculous, crazy passage from this Vince Rigari piece, which is brilliant.
Yes.
You should read it in full if you haven't. It got hairy in Terengganu, Malaysia, when football director Matt Simon and team manager Darren Dobson were going for a late-night walk searching for a convenience store when the latter, head down, following the map on his phone, stumbled into an open-air drain pit along the side of the street and fell into a 4-meter-deep pool of mud and slush. There was genuine fear for his life. So these AFC Cup trips, you talk about a tough place to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
falling into an open air drain is, I think, the next rung above Stoke City on a Tuesday night.
Maybe the toughest place they went in their adventure was when they went to MacArthur and had to face that ground announcer that Taya was talking about before. Gerardo is calling them the Central Coast Mythbusters. Yeah, look, I massively hope that they do well tonight. We saw kind of, the Wanderers, their success in Asia. It's still talked about to this day. It's still one of the greatest ever achievements, probably the greatest achievement in Australian club football. SBS is making a documentary about it, which is probably going to make Popper look like an absolute genius, and probably why he's going to ask for another $700,000. But yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Any final thoughts on the Mariners before we move on? Taryn, this is a bit of a choose your own adventure MAFFS thing. So, feel free to stay, feel free to add something in, feel free to go, whatever you like. But anything to add on the Mariners?
The Mariners are great. Forza Mariners. I definitely am not biased by growing up 5 minutes away from the stadium. No, it's great. It's genuinely great for the Central Coast. It's fantastic to see the club doing so well. Such a weird little region. To succeed in anything, you pretty much have to move either to Sydney or to Newcastle, and usually to Sydney. So it's very fun to have something from the Central Coast that is so successful. So yeah, good vibes.
Speaking of something from Australia that's so successful, we should talk about the Massimo Luongo remontada back in the Prem with Ipswich. This is an incredible story. Josh, Luongo is like an interesting player in terms of, he was at Tottenham early on, kind of in his youth career, and we thought this guy's going to be like an amazing, one of the great Australian kind of midfielders. Was our best player, more or less, at the Asian Cup in 2015, which is one of probably again the best Socceroos ever achievement. And then it's really he's really struggled since then. And maybe he's been misused probably by a lot of coaches or just unlucky in other cases. But to see him at the heart of a midfield in a team that's going up to the Premiership, what a story.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And I think he's finally found a manager that appreciates his talents. I mean, yes, like the injury history is probably the primary thing. And I'm not sure whether they're managing him differently at this at Ipswich than they have at previous clubs. But that's really what's derailed his career. But I'm just so glad to see him playing under a manager in Kieran McKenna, who plays some lovely football. I mean, they scored some outrageous goals this season, Ipswich. And the killer stat that's been doing the rounds about McKenna is that since he was appointed in December 2021, he's won the most points in the top 4 leagues in England, 236 ahead of Pep Guardiola on 220. So it's extraordinary.
Fraud.
And Kieran McKenna has a beautiful head of hair. So, Teo, maybe you're onto something there. But I'm just glad that he's finally found a manager who truly appreciates what he can do on the pitch and overlooks some of the things that he can't do, which is, maybe cover all the ground or back up or, every 3 days. Like he's being managed correctly. And I think we're finally seeing him realize some of the potential that we all saw back when he was, nominated for a Ballon d'Or and winning the Asian Cup with Australia.
John says Luongo was 5 minutes away from accepting a contract at Perth Glory 18 months ago. Now look at him, EPL bound. Perth could use him. Maybe he could be part of the ownership team. Joe, you wanted to say something about Luongo?
Yeah. Not about Luongo, but on Ipswich, Cam Burgess, also a big part of their team. Big boy, real big boy, monster in defense. He actually scored last week as well. But I wonder what will happen with him next season. Obviously promoted, I think he played about 39 games. He played a lot of games at Ipswich, so he's a big part of their success. So very interesting to see if they keep him on or if another championship team pick him up, because he was really impressive this year.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's always that difficult thing where you go up to the Premier League, you maybe have to adjust the way you play. So there's a slightly different requirement of the players needed. You have that massive cash windfall. Obviously, usually the owners and managers are keen to make some signings. So it will be interesting to see how much football, even though these Luongo and Burgess have been such kind of key parts of the promotion push and getting them up, it's no guarantee that they'll necessarily be a part of the team regulars next season, which is always a frustrating thing. So, but look, we hope, and congratulations to Cameron Burgess as well, the third best Burgess in Australian football, behind Max and Darcy. But look, one thing I also want to say, just speaking of the championship, I don't know if you guys saw this. Birmingham City got relegated, right? And there was a fan who ran onto the pitch. There was many fans who ran onto the pitch, I guess in protest or whatever. But one fan ran on, got a ball about 30 yards from goal, absolutely smacked it into the top corner. All the fans who had run onto the pitch as well, angry, started celebrating the goal, right? And I think if you ever, look, we saw it all went wrong with one A-League pitch invasion. But if you ever do a pitch invasion, I'll say the only thing you should be doing is trying to whack them in from distance, all right? Just absolutely smash one into the top corner. The crowd goes wild. You turn the mood of the place. I saw people say, Birmingham City, we might be relegated, but we've still got a sense of humour. Great day out. This is the highlight of the day. So incredible stuff in the championship. Look, we should touch on quickly. Ange struggling a little bit in England. Joe, you're our Tottenham man. What's going on? 1 win in 5 matches. Is he feeling the pressure? He's getting a bit prickly. What's happening?
It's interesting. Tottenham have not been playing well for a long time. I think I've said it a couple of times before, even after a few of the wins this year. I mean, they beat Aston Villa 4-0 away, but still just not attacking and not playing the football that earned Ange, the first 2 Premier League Manager of the Month awards. They saw him sitting top of the table all up until that Chelsea disaster game in November. It's hard to put your finger on what it is. Now, you can say perhaps Ange is feeling the pressure, but we saw at the start of the year how he wants to play his football and that it's effective and that it works. Whether the players are running out of steam, I saw this week that he's come out and said up to 12 players are for sale. So clearly he's not happy with some of the squad members.
Cattle.
That's maybe a lack of cattle, he's claiming. But it's very difficult to see because after so many years of fossil, terrible football with Conte and Mourinho and the other guy, I can't remember, Nuno, seeing a manager come in and wanting to attack and play like this gives the fans positivity. So, I mean, I don't think there's any cause for Ange out. I don't think anyone would be silly enough to do that. But Teo, what do you think? Do you think he's under a bit of pressure?
I wanted to throw the question out there. How many winless does he go at the start of next season before it is actual unironic Ange out? Because I feel as though there's been a portion of the Spurs fan base, maybe you're more global fans than you're at the ground week-to-week fans, that have wanted his head from the moment he was appointed. And I feel as though that noise is only going to get louder and louder. So how important is a fast start next season? Because I think it could be as few as 4 or 5 games before, especially if someone like Thomas Tuchel is on the market, before we actually start to see not like overreaction Ange out, but genuine Ange out.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's very important. I mean, it's completely fair as well. The way they're playing, it's not just the losses, the big losses, but no attacking threat at the moment. And that's Ange's big thing. He wants to play positive possession-based football, but they're not making the chances. I don't think anyone in the team is really in form. So I think...
So why do they sign Timo Werner then, Joe, if they want to play possession-based football?
The thing, Timo Werner, he's a real mystery, isn't he? Because when he's dashing down the wings and crossing the ball in, you think this guy's actually all right, but he just cannot finish. He cannot finish. And it's been the same old story for years now. Chelsea, Leipzig, and sometimes maybe good, but he just cannot finish.
He looks very stressed. He's one of the players I've seen. He looks so stressed on the pitch. Like football seems to be, even though he's obviously quite good at it, he's built quite a successful professional career. It seems like a very stressful job for him. He's exactly kind of the opposite of Ronaldinho, smiling all the time. Giraldo
I was going to say, I mean, Timo Werner, like, he should be getting a La Ionica sponsorship because the bloke's a headless chook. Like, I think they need a Grealish style winger, like someone who maybe not necessarily Jack Grealish if you can't get him off City, but maybe he wants to play for a manager who gives him a bit more freedom than the bald fraud that I mentioned earlier. But I think they need somebody who can actually hold possession and keep the attack going in the final third rather than a player like Werner or even Brennan Johnson. I think is a bit as Giraldo says, one-paced, a bit, too much go. And they can't really generate as many attacking opportunities against set defenses. The other thing is, I think the set pieces is killing them. And Ange taking such a hard line in the press conference of like, it's not about the set pieces. I don't care about set pieces. Just say you're working on them, mate. Like, it's not a dialectic point. You don't have to say football is not about set pieces for people to admire the way you play football. Clearly, like 30-something% of goals come from set pieces. You should be working on them. I'm sure they are. But the fact that he's taken this hard line and just batting away questions about it, and then they keep copying goals from set pieces, I think that's a huge factor as to why he's so under the pump now, because that's all they're going to ask about.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Another good point is John saying Timo Werner needs a bath. Yeah, Josh, I mean, that was one of your great ideas, is more baths in football. And do you think maybe instead of having your players warm up on the pitch, especially your nervous ones, right? Just have a tub on the sideline, get them into a nice steamy warm bath, and then they'll be a bit more relaxed when they come onto the field. Do you think maybe that's going to be the answer next season for Spurs?
I think Timo Werner needs like earplugs or something, noise-cancelling headphones on the pitch, because I remember when he was at Leipzig, he had to be substituted during an away game in Turkey against, can't remember if it was Fenerbahce or Galatasaray, one of the two Istanbul giants. And apparently he got substituted because he was feeling unwell, and they thought it was to do with the racket in the stadium. So, I think maybe he needs a bit of sensory deprivation. Maybe he needs a salt water tank.
Yeah, or maybe he needs to come and play for Western United or MacArthur, and score 700 goals a season.
That was honestly when playing it out from the back goes wrong of jokes. I could see that coming from so far away, and then stole, nicked in one possession, put it into an empty net, and ripped his shirt off in celebration.
We could see it, and I also thought it's a bit easy. Do you just go with it? It's a bit too obvious, but you got to take your opportunities when you get them. You get one on the plate, you just put them away. Look, any final plugs? Any final things to say before?
Well, just one last thing on Ange. It's been a difficult 1 win in 5, but I think very early or late tonight they're playing Liverpool away. Very tough game historically. And then later in the week, Manchester City. And if they win that game, there's a good chance that Arsenal win the title. So a very difficult week.
Was I deliberately negging Ange so he can pin me on the wall and try to take something off Man City? I don't know. You tell
Oh.
me. Fingers fucking.
Joe-
I swore. Fingers
Joe,
crossed.
As a Spurs fan, what would you prefer? Spurs win all their next games, or they lose and Arsenal also did not become champions?
Well, if they win all their games, they're still likely to end up in the Europa League. So I don't want Arsenal to win the title. So I will very sneakily say we'll let
So come on, City.
play 11 Timo Werners on Thursday.
Taryn, thanks so much for coming on the show. Is there any final things that you want to say? Any final words of wisdom to the 15 million listeners that we get every week? It's weird that do you think it's weird that it stagnates at 15 million, that we've never been able to break through the kind of 17 million barrier, or is it just good consistency?
Look, I think once you break through that barrier, then it becomes too big. You become too famous. You start having problems. Baths aren't enough to solve your problems at that point.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it just needs to, you don't want to get to that point. You want to keep it at 15 million. It's a healthy number.
No, yeah.
Any higher than that, it's too far. It's too far.
Yeah, Joe's already getting paparazzi outside his house, so we gotta just. I think we need to lose a few subscribers, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Some of you look out. We're cutting viewers.
And now for the easiest part of any podcaster's job, the cuts.
Joseph Giacconi says, "I think we hit a peak of 21 million tonight."
Oh no,
the pressure is on. Will this be where we all fall apart? Is this the last dance? It's a good question. Josh, you got anything to plug this week?
I sure do. I'm going to plug something on behalf of Tarrant, which is a massive MPLW game on Wednesday night. Tarrant, you're still up for that one? BT Connor Reserve? Preston Lions?
I am absolutely.
So
it's actually a huge game.
Yes,
please,
go on.
I'm sorry, it is.
I'm hooked.
It's a huge game. I'm sorry.
It's so much
Tell me
funnier
more.
if you said it's a huge game, and then you said, "But I can't tell you why." Yeah, the Alex.
Hang on. Is that the cell? Hive. The hive mind is activated.
Taryn, you can expand on that if you like, but we've had a lot of fun. You're not expanding on it, so if you'd like to just pass.
No, it will be a good game. Both teams, South are coming into it off the back of a couple of wins. They're in good form on the weekend. I called their game on the weekend as well. They beat Burundara 1-0. So, yeah, it'll be a big crowd apparently too. So get around it. BT Connor or on YouTube if you would like to watch that way, or if you don't live in Melbourne for some strange reason. Can't imagine why.
Yes. Teo, anything to plug? Any shows that finished 4 weeks ago that we can go back and watch on YouTube?
No, just buy your All Stars tickets.
Yes.
Enjoy your football. I've got some catching up on the NPL to do now that my A-League women's and men's seasons are over. But I'm hinting at something there. Buy your All Stars tickets. 24th of May.
As he is the voice of Australian fun football. You know a game's going to be fun when you hear Teo Pellizzeri on the mic, all right? It is, look, no one can have beef with him. He's not Drake. He's not Kendrick. He's just in a whole nother level. That's what happens when Teo gets on the mic.
So I think the real secret why no one can have beef with me is I've muted about 2,000 accounts on Twitter.
If you don't want one of the great, but everyone complains about, Twitter's this. Just mute away, man. Even sometimes you got to mute some of your closest friends because they're just talking a lot of nonsense. That's fine. All right. I've had to do that kind of recently, but no, I am muted. What an ironic moment.
Sorry, I just had to mute one of my closest friends.
All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. All 21 million of you. We're gonna have to cut 6 million of you next week. So write in and tell us why you shouldn't be cut. Make sure you enjoy your football. Make sure you have a bath. Make sure you touch grass. Make sure you expose the burners. Make sure you don't go too woke. Make sure you ask us questions. Come up with new ideas. Put water on your nets. Make sure your nets are chained. Any other piece of advice that we have to give to these people?
Post us on Reddit.
Buy your All-Star tickets. Watch Preston Lion women's against Sydney Olympic, South Melbourne. So many things to do, so many things to enjoy. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Put on notifications because I don't know what time